Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are connecting from today. Please let us know where that is. If you can just post in the chat where you're connecting from, it would be awesome to know what everybody is. I am excited to welcome you all to one of our Hacking HR live chat series conversations. We invite great authors and speakers to this stage to share their ideas, their insights, their research with all of us in this Hacking HR community. So I am hoping that you have tuned in to some of the previous live chats that we've had before. All of them are posted on our community platform, the Hacking HR Lab. You can go there, hackinghrlab.io. You will find all the previous live chat series. And of course, I'm hoping that you continue to stay engaged in all the conversations that we're having here. And I am hoping that, number one, of course, you let us know where you're connecting from today. And also that if you have any questions, that if you have any comments, anything that you want to share with the community, that you can please post it in the chat. So I got to tell you this, a few months back, ChatGPT has been, going around for a long time. Now with OpenAI, this version for the public came out, I think at the end of 2022, at the beginning of this year, maybe. And a few months, I honestly thought, this is another hype, even though I myself have been talking about the impact of AI in the workplace, but I just thought it was another hype, right? And a friend of mine comes to me and says, Enrique, are you already up in ChatGPT? Are you already using it? And this was back like in March of this year. And I said, no. He said, well, just give it a try, man. Just go there and create your account and give it a try. So I go to ChatGPT and I gave it a try, and it blew my mind, I gotta say, right? And it blew my mind for many different reasons. I always knew that it didn't need to be perfect. It just had to be good enough for me to be able to use the tool to support the work that I was doing. So one example of that was the design of a lot of the events that we do in Hacking HR. We design a lot of events, and you can imagine designing the agenda, the learning objectives, the descriptions, the sessions, the title sessions, or the sessions that we're doing in each of the events, the panels, All of this takes a lot of time, and we were doing all that manually before, and it was hours and hours of work to create each of these sort of components of the learning pieces that we were doing. And at the beginning of this year, when I got into ChatGPT, of course, I started using ChatGPT for to help us out with all learning and development stuff. And I would say that it has perhaps reduced, 75% of the amount of time that we were originally dedicating to do that. And of course, it's not that I'm taking the other 75% of the time that now I have available to do whatever. I'm now using it to build more relationships with the speakers, to have better conversations, to think better about the kind of conversations that we want to have. So I'm saying this, and this is one piece of AI, but I'm using this as an example of how powerful thinking about technology, and particularly generative AI, how powerful it is to allow us to get back some time to either rehumanize work, which will be the topic of the conversation of the day, or whatever else you want to do with that time. So anyway, just mentioning that story because I am very excited to be talking today about how AI will rehumanize work if that's what you choose to do with the time that you're getting back from using AI. So I am super excited to welcome Brian to the screen with me this morning. Hello, Brian. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Enrique. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Super excited about this conversation. AI is both, something of a mythical nature that both excites people, but also gets them really scared. So I think it's funny, right? It's like in the extremes. Like some people are like, "Oh, we're gonna take over the world and solve all our problems with AI," and some other people are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so scared of this because I don't know if I'm gonna lose my job and I won't be employable ever again because my job can be done with AI." And we're gonna be talking about that. But first, let's begin here. I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience so that we know who we're talking with, and then we just take it from there.
Excellent. So that sounds great. I'm looking forward to getting into it. So my name is Brian Evergreen. I have written a book. That's part of why I think we're having this conversation, called Autonomous Transformation, Creating a More Human Future in the Era of Artificial Intelligence, that really draws from a combination of, yes, research and interviews of public sector, private sector, research institute, and academic leaders. But also, I think the real ignition point for the book and for my work and research is from my own practical experience as an AI leader at Microsoft. I used to lead Microsoft's US artificial intelligence strategy. And then most recently, I was the autonomous AI co-innovation lead for Microsoft Research. And so I, in terms of me and my background, I think a lot of the passion that I have around the space comes from working from an applied perspective with Fortune 500 C-level executives around the world. And some of those unanswered questions that kept coming up, I sort of went away and hid literally in Norway and on a writing retreat. And between that and a few others, to go endeavor to solve some of those questions.
Oh, that's fantastic, Brian. Thank you so much. And I am, so honored to have you with us here in the show. I actually wanted to ask you to begin with what rehumanizing work means, right? When we think about the idea behind what a rehumanized workplace and the nature of work look like, what is that, and how will AI have an impact on that process to rehumanize the workplace and work itself?
So I think the beginning of the answer to that question starts from a historical perspective. If you imagine that the year is actually 1911 instead of 2023, it's 1911. Ford had just invented the assembly line. The Model T is in production, and actually the greatest issue that was facing, at least in the U.S., but I think more broadly as well, the greatest issue was a question of efficiency. And so, okay, now we're inventing the middle class. We're starting to create more devices that people can have in their homes than ever before. And there was a question of how do we create more of those more quickly and at a same degree of quality? Because at that point, it was every single individual piece made, depending on who made it, it might be completely different, and the quality could vary significantly. And so the attempt to address that was there was a gentleman by the name of Frederick Taylor, who's known as the first management consultant, who said, we're going to come up with a way to document every single process. Let's apply the scientific method to management, and we'll document every process with time, with stopwatches, and we'll say, okay, first this step, then this step, then this step. We'll look at how everybody's doing it in a factory, and then we'll design the perfect way of doing that process. And anything that we can automate with a machine, we're going to automate with a machine. Anything else, we'll have a human do it. And so that was a big step in dehumanizing work, I think.
Mm.
It gives a historical perspective for where we are today, where continuing to evolve out of that sort of underlying worldview or mindset that an organization is a large mechanical machine. And therefore, we as people end up being cogs inside of that machine. And so in terms of, to answer your question about rehumanizing work, what I've found so delightful in my work that I've uncovered is that because I started out to try to answer the question of why are only 13% of these AI initiatives successful? So we all hear about ChatGPT, but in the enterprise space, very, very few AI initiatives or data science initiatives are actually successful. And so for me, from a practical perspective at Microsoft, I was digging away at the why is that? And the delightful answer is that it actually has very little to do with the technology and has a lot more to do with how people are working together and how their management is treating them and the incentives that are set up, and the dehumanized mechanistic sort of way of working has sort of run out of steam. It's finally met, I think, a worthy and equal opponent in the new context where data scientists have, job offers waiting out the door at any given point. So if they don't feel connected to the meaning of what they're doing, they can easily take a high-paying job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the same with, from frontline worker all the way through the whole organization. Before, even 30 years ago, if you didn't like the job you had, well, if you didn't have anyone else in your network that could make an introduction for you, you were kind of stuck. Now, with what we've seen, especially even more so in the during the pandemic, anywhere can access educational resources for free, and they can learn practically any job. I mean, obviously there's certain ones that require degrees, but you can at least get into most fields now with free online resources, and you can connect through platforms like LinkedIn with anyone hiring anywhere. And so that context of what leadership was in the 20th century and what was effective, which was kind of treating people like cogs in a machine, used to be profitable and it used to work. And now we're in a context that's shifted to the degree where treating people like cogs in a machine, well, they're going to quiet quit, or they're going to, or your consumers are going to boycott your product, or, there's so many other factors at play now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I thank you for bringing up the story of how modern work has evolved, particularly, of course, since Frederick Taylor, right? And I am hoping that one day we can fully remove Taylorism from our management and leadership style. And it's very well alive, by the way. Yeah, it's still very well alive because most organizations still organize themselves as Frederick Taylor, pretty much, describe that they should be organized. And
that's right.
Let me ask you this, part of the dehumanizing of work has happened because we don't have time anymore for things such as caring for our well-being, our mental health, our wellness. And actually, work may be the one cause that is destroying mental health, wellness, and well-being. And then we go back to the premise of technology. The premise of technology has always been, throughout the history of humankind, has always been, we're going to help you be more efficient at doing something. We're going to help you doing it better, faster, more effectively. And then that's going to give you back some time to do something else, right? And that's how we evolved, culturally, biologically, we evolved that way. But when you look at the workplace today, and we have that same premise, and we tell people, we're going to give back some time to you to free up something and, maybe do more creative activities or care for your well-being, you implement some technology and you find yourself now having some time removed from your agenda, but filling up that time with something else. And something else that is not what the promise was about, which was giving you back time to be more creative or to care for your mental health and for your well-being. So how do we avoid using AI to get back into that trap, the trap of, I'm giving you 50% of your time, but now you're going to have to fill it up with something that still feels like you are a cog in the machine?
So I think the first aspect of that is the question of efficiency. I think that we are in a society that sort of, for lack of a better phrase, it worships efficiency as the
Yeah.
highest aim. And what I'd say is a good example of that would be in a customer care center. You could say, I am the most efficient call center agent. I have handled 300 calls in one shift, and that's efficient, right? But then you might have the question, okay, well, wait, what was the quality of those calls? Are any of those
Yeah.
customers happy? Are they leaving for our competitors? And so, and that's very obvious in a customer care standpoint. But if you think about knowledge work as well, I think that you can fill up your time, especially like you mentioned. I mean, what we saw with the pandemic was, now that people aren't going into the office, they're just adding more time to what they're doing, to their total meeting schedule, for example, for the day. And also the idea that we've seen where people seem to equate how busy they are with how successful or important they are. And so I think that on a personal standpoint, in terms of individually speaking, when you find efficiency gains, instead of saying, great, how can I achieve even more because I want that next promotion, which is very much a cog like, I want to move up this, ladder, so to speak, instead saying, okay, I'm going to fill up that time, that extra hour, even if it's 1 hour a week that you've saved. I'm going to put a block in there that I'm going to go for, and maybe, or even when I go on calls, when I'm on any call where I don't need to be sharing my screen, or it's not so critical for me to be in front of a camera, I'm going to make that a walking conversation.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to try to find ways to connect with my colleagues to talk about anything but work. So those, I think, on a personal standpoint, but I think from a leadership standpoint or from a management standpoint, I think that the way that like you said, the evolution of work, I think a lot of times we look at from a workplace hierarchy, the repetitive tasks, right, are the first things that to go, so to speak. And I think that for the way that the opportunity that creates is that people can then move up the hierarchy to more creative and interesting and meaningful work. Um, but it takes a lot more strategy from a leadership perspective. Saying
Yeah.
I'm going to cut costs by automating X% of jobs and just eliminating those jobs is that's the easy route for a leader,
Yeah.
right? And to make their numbers and treating them like a cog in a machine. The harder route is to say, okay, with the efficiency gains or with the increased profitability of what we're doing now, let's have an expansion mindset and say, what new product am I going to introduce that is going to require, because it's new, it's going to require manual work along the way. And so how can I bring those people over to do that work? It's a harder leadership problem or challenge than saying, I'm just going to try to eliminate as many jobs as I can. The other piece of it, in terms of the long term, zoomed all the way out to the global perspective of like all jobs being automated, assumes that every job that exists today and all the work and value that we create today is as far as we have to go as humanity.
Mm.
So, for instance, if we just automate everything and we move into like a Wall-E like state where we're just sort of served by robots, right? Then that means we're not going to ever cure cancer. And that means
Yeah.
that we're not, like, there's so much more value for us as people to go create. So the idea of saying, okay, if we are able to automate X% of tasks, and I think decoupling tasks from jobs is really important. And for leaders to say, okay, I'm going to transition the person that's managing these tasks. Now that those tasks can be automated, I can transition them over to doing this other work. And maybe it's work that hasn't been done yet. Maybe there's not already a job family for that. But by moving someone in that position, that can add more overall value to the organization. But it takes more creativity and strategy for the leader to do that.
Yeah. I was thank you for that. And I was thinking that part of one of the reasons, or a few of the reasons why so many people are disengaged at work,
Mhm.
you go back about what they want, right? And they want to have some purpose at work, right?
That's right.
We spend a third of our, day at work, and we do this for 50 years. And
Mhm.
you go and you're just the cog in the machine, same thing day in and day out. And
Yep.
of course, you're going to be disengaged if that's what you're doing. And there's an element of people wanting to find purpose at work. There's an element of people wanting to create meaningful connections and relationships at work. There's an element of people wanting to use, for the good of the organization and the world, wanting to use their creative potential, their talents, their skills. And I am wondering, how do we create the case for leaders to say people already want that and they are spending 50% of their time doing activities that can be done by technology. So how instead of adding extra, you know, crap, forgive me the word for the word, extra crap to that 50%, once you free it up with some technology, how can we allow them to use that 50% to create value that doesn't exist yet,
Mhm.
rather than making what exists already more efficiently, which could create value, but it may
Right.
not. So how do we
Right.
create that case for leaders? Because this is a hard route that you talked about before. It's a hard stuff. So how do we create that case?
So yes, so I have two or three things that I want to say from what you said. First of all, I love the way that you framed it, and I'll say that the way that we often think about it, I think, is problem solving as leaders. So it's like, okay, we have this problem now where this person has more bandwidth. What am I going to put them on, right?
Mhm.
And I think so. For me, I describe problem solving as the craft of getting rid of what you don't want. But
Mhm.
getting rid of what you don't want doesn't necessarily mean that it has nothing to do with getting what it is that you do want. So if
Yeah.
you in counterpoint to that is future solving, saying which is the craft of getting what it is that you do want, and it begins with envisioning a future and saying, this is the future that we want. It could be that we want to have, no workplace safety incidents. We want that to be a thing of the past, not just like, X number of days, but like it's completely eradicated from our company. Or you could say, we want to, if you're a chocolate company, we want to guarantee there's no child labor in our supply chain. Or,
Mhm.
it could be grandiose, like across the whole company. It could be small. It could be something just for a team. But starting with that future and saying, okay, the next question is what would have to be true for us to create that future? And the next question is what would have to be true for those things to be true? And you can work backwards to where you are today, which I describe kind of like programming the GPS when you're going to go on a road trip. If I start with a problem solving, I say, well, we're going to go on a road trip, got to fuel up. Okay, we'll just drive to the gas station. Okay, well, now actually, I think I want to get some coffee. Okay, now we drive 10 minutes to a coffee shop. Okay, great. Now I actually kind of have to use the restroom. So let's go over to some other place, once get off the freeway again, right? And you could end up going to five or 10 stops, maybe where you're in completely the wrong direction because you didn't start by routing to where it is that you're trying to go and planning stops along the way. Instead, you're just looking for the next problem to solve. And the other point to your point about sort of, creating new value versus just like trimming the efficiencies on existing value prop, I would say that a company that only does problem solving or only says, okay, great, how can we be more and more efficient? That question is, how can we keep making more money off of the existing thing that we create, the existing value that we create? Like, how do we make that more profitable? But that's not the path to having an iPhone moment on the stage or
Yeah.
to introducing something like streaming like Netflix did, or like you're never going to have a breakthrough moment as a company if your only focus is on efficiency. And so you need to, I think, to your point about like an idea of a way somebody could solve something like that, could be that you say, okay, if we achieved X amount of more time for our people, that they have more bandwidth, let's do future solving Fridays, which is kind of a degree of what Google did, right? Where they said on
Yeah.
Fridays, we're going to let people just like run wild with whatever ideas. Toyota's another one really well known for having people do bottoms up innovation. Everybody's job is innovation, right? And so I think that there are some companies that have already taken steps in that direction, and so that's probably what I would say is sort of it's kind of a culture question. It's not something that you can just prescribe, because if you say, if a
Yeah.
leader that thinks of their people, even if they don't mean to, even if their personal value is that every person is important, if they just sort of inherently see work as sort of this mechanistic machine and people as cogs in that machine, then even if they implement a free Friday where people can brainstorm and such, they're not going to greenlight those projects. And then, the interest from people and that tie back to meaning is going to fade over time. And then the
Yeah.
last thing I'll say is back to that point of future solving versus problem solving, is that if you join an organization today, most of us probably have experienced something like this, not the HR onboarding, but like joining the team where it's, okay, welcome to our team. These are the 3 initiatives that we're working on right now. This is the next milestones. This is the budget. These are the stakeholders that are involved. And then this is your set of either your work stream or your tasks within that, right? That's probably sounds pretty, we've all probably experienced that at some point. And from a future solving perspective, the conversation can sound a little bit more like, this is the future that we're trying to create within our organization. And these are the things that we think would have to be true for us to create that future. And that maps back to where we are today. And this is the work stream that we're asking you to lead. Now, that work stream might be incredibly boring of its own merit, but the fact that it's in this path toward creating some kind of future that you can get behind suddenly makes that work so much more inherently meaningful just from a strategic perspective. You don't have to add more, more events or company parties or throw big things. It's like just baking it into the way that you do strategy work even can
Yeah.
start to tie meaning back into the work that we do.
Yeah, which is it's interesting because what you all that you're describing is aided by technology, but it's not just technology.
That's right.
Technology is the enabler, right? There's got to be leadership. There has
That's
to
right.
be culture. There has to be
Mhm.
understanding about what people are looking for when you think about work. Technology is the I think we see technology as the panacea that is going to be solving all the problems that we have, but you got to make decisions. You have to lead,
Yes.
and I think about this with sometimes with some level of fear, because
Mm.
I fear that we will give technology some level of power to decide the decisions that have to be made by humans, right? How do we, maybe technology will never, I don't know, but I don't know if we're ever gonna have a bicentennial man kind of thing. I don't know if you ever watched the
Right.
movie, right? Like, this level of awareness or consciousness
Mm.
from a robot. But right now,
Right.
for AI or any technology to understand what it means to have some calling and meaning and purpose as a
Mhm.
human, that has to be understood by another human and not by
Right.
technology.
Right.
So you have to be very responsible as a company leader to bring technology as an enabler, but also make sure that you have the humanistic, people-centered sort of focus to it too.
I couldn't agree more. I think that, to your point, the first point you made around leading with technology, I describe it. I used to be a chess player. I used to represent the U.S. versus other countries in chess, and one of the rules is touch move, which is if you pick up a piece, you have to move it. And if you accidentally pick up the wrong piece, you could be in big trouble, right? Where you have to move this piece somewhere, and you're going to get checkmated the next move or something. And so I think in a similar way, I think right now there's a temptation to pick up the large language model piece and then look for
Yeah,
where am I going to move the piece on the board, instead of starting and saying, what is my vision for the future of my organization, my team, of the market, and then what strategy would I need to put in place to make that vision come to life. And then strategy then involves planning and tactics, and then all the way at the end is the tools. It's similar
yeah,
to a home remodel.
yeah,
You don't pick up a skill saw and walk around your house saying, where am I going to use this
yeah,
saw to do
yeah,
something? You don't have a electric screwdriver driven transformation, right? Instead, you say, I want to remodel my kitchen. This is what I want it to look like. And then they have to do an assessment of, okay, which walls are load bearing. And then nowhere in the conversation up front are you talking about tools, right?
yeah,
They're not coming to you saying, but wait, we've got this saw that is just fantastic, right? That's not going to happen. Instead, yes, we can do that for you. This is the pricing. This is some of what, this is examples of work we've done before. And then, once it's greenlit, then the tools come to the work site, right? And I think right now we've kind of entered an era where I call it tool worship, where we sort of exalt the tool and mystify it. Like you said in
yeah,
the very beginning, it's become mystified as if it's some kind of oracle, when all AI really is it's a machine that can apply math super fast.
yeah,
That's like the most basic, right? So if you imagine that there's been a mathematical model created to, do translation, and it can apply it very fast, that doesn't mean that it actually understands either language. It
yeah.
just can translate the correlations between them incredibly quickly. And so in terms of that mystical element that sometimes gets ascribed to it, I think that's a sort of pitfall that we can fall into.
I agree with that. Brian, as we're getting closer to wrapping up our conversation, I think we're gonna have to organize another conversation to get very tactical about some recommendations, particularly for our HR audience, right? But
Mhm.
maybe I want to use this question actually to sort of wrap up our chat, and it is this.
Sure.
Um, for those people who are either on the extreme of technology will solve everything,
Mhm.
and the others that are on the extreme of I don't even want to think about technology because I don't want to lose my job. So maybe
Mhm.
I'm going to ignore this for a while. what would you tell people in those extremes? What would you tell those that think that technology will do everything, or that we shouldn't bring technology on board because it could put human jobs at risk?
So I'd say, and this is probably hopefully more relevant than some of the comments I've made in terms of an HR audience, which is that there's three outlooks on jobs today that I've codified. Two of them are going to sound very familiar, and I think you described them. One is job fatalism, which is that AI is coming for our jobs, right? And like, let's just prepare the way for our robot overlords. I think the issue with that, I think, is like what I mentioned before, which is that means that the value that we have to create as humans is over. We're not going to create any new value, right? And I disagree with that. Then on the other side, you have job protectionism, which is the current class of jobs as they exist today with the tasks that make them up must be protected at all costs. And what's happening there, I think, is that we're combining jobs and people, because what we really want to protect is the people, not the actual
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
And so, and if we, by taking on a job protectionistic kind of mindset or view, what that does is if the rest of the market is moving forward, then you have a longer term economic risk to your whole organization, not just that one set of jobs, but your whole organization could go out of business because you weren't able to keep up. The third that I recommend is job pragmatism, which is saying that, okay, our jobs are going to be transformed, but by being strategic at the onset, from the time that a technology initiative is greenlit that might make up enough automation to either replace or minimize the tasks on a person's workload, that there's at least 6 months at the very, very minimum. Usually there's a couple of years before it's actually developed to the point where it can be put into production. And so when that's happening, where the automation is then resulting in job loss, it's almost always a failure to plan, not necessarily just right. And so for HR leaders, one rule that I had when I was at Microsoft, and we were investing in doing what we called iconic partnerships. One of the rules I had is that I want either the CPO, CHRO, or someone from their team to be in the first meeting with us where we're talking about how the business is going to transform, because it's a three-legged stool of people, the technology, and the business strategies. And you can't have one without the other. And so if at that point where the technology initiatives are being set, if HR is in the room and setting the workforce transformation at the same time in tandem together, then I think that, better choices can be made than if HR is forced to react to changes that technologists are making, which I've seen happen all too often.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And that is a real strategic role for HR, right? To be part of those conversations. And by the way, I gotta say that conversation is happening in some room right now in your workplace, whether you know that it's happening or not, whether you've been invited or not. That conversation is happening somewhere, even if it's in the form of how this AI thing may affect our business going forward, whether you have an idea or not. And I mean this as the C-suite leadership from an organization. So make sure that if you're in HR, you find where that room is, who is in that room, and that you get involved, because you want to make sure that that leg of that stool is present there. The group of people, the function representing workforce planning, succession planning, skills, learning, leadership, and all these kinds of things that are critical to make any digital transformation successful. So, Brian, thank you so much for spending this time with me and our community and sharing all of these insights to hopefully get some people inspired about the possibilities, but also know that all AI and technological transformation it's intrinsically a very human-oriented process where you bring technology as an enabler and not the solver of all the problems that we have at work.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for the next episode of our Hacking HR live chat series. I will see you all soon. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brian. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.